The journey to Hogwarts does not begin on a magical platform, but in the gray, mundane world of Muggles. For Harry Potter, it began with a reluctant, silent drive from the Dursleys, the air in the car thick with their disapproval. King's Cross Station in London was a chaotic symphony of human noise, announcements echoing through the vast hall, the screech of train wheels, the hurried footsteps of 1,000 travelers rushing towards their ordinary destinations. Harry, a small, uncertain boy with a heavy trunk, a snowy owl in a cage, and a ticket for platform 9 3/4, felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The platform, according to his ticket, simply did not exist. He was lost, abandoned by his relatives, on the cusp of a new world with no visible door. He approached a passing guard, but his question was met with a look of derision, the man assuming he was being mocked. The fear of being stranded, of the entire magical world being a cruel joke, began to creep in Dot. It was then that he heard them. A family of red-haired people, their voices warm and cheerful, pushing trolleys laden with trunks and owls. He heard the mother say the word Muggles, and a jolt of relief shot through him. He followed them, a silent shadow, and watched as one by one the older boys ran directly at the solid brick barrier between platforms 9 and 10, and vanished. It was real. Gathering all his courage, Harry aimed his own trolley at the barrier. He closed his eyes and pushed, expecting a painful crash. Instead, he passed through the cold, solid brick and emerged into a world of vibrant, magical life. Platform 9 3/4 was a scene of joyous chaos. A magnificent scarlet steam engine, the Hogwarts Express, was waiting, billowing. Clouds of white steam that drifted over the heads of the bustling crowd. Witches and wizards in robes of every color hugged their children goodbye. Owls hooted from their cages, and the air hummed with excitement and magic. For the first time, Harry felt not like an outsider, but like he belonged. He managed to heave his trunk onto the train, and after a difficult search, found what he had been longing for, an empty compartment. He sank onto the worn seat, watching the emotional goodbyes on the platform, a quiet ache in his heart for the family he had never known. Dot, as the train gave a great lurch and began to pull away from the station. The finality of his departure set in. He was leaving behind a decade of neglect and loneliness, heading towards an unknown future. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the track was a soothing, hypnotic sound, a promise of a new life. Soon, the door to his compartment slid open. A boy with bright red hair, a smudge of dirt on his nose, and a lanky, awkward frame stood there. "Is anyone sitting here?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seats. "Everywhere else is full." Harry shook his head, and the boy sat down. His name was Ron Weasley. The quiet solitude was broken, and in its place, the first tentative seeds of a legendary friendship began to sprout. The journey was long, and the English countryside began to unfold outside the window. Ron, open and friendly, was a stark contrast to the closed-off Dursleys. He spoke of his large wizarding family, his older brothers, and his pet rat, Scabbers, who was currently asleep in his lap. Harry, in turn, spoke of his own strange life, and for the first time, he could talk about magic without fear of being called a liar. The hours passed comfortably. Around midday, the rhythmic clatter of the train was joined by a new sound, the rattling of a trolley. A smiling witch with a dimpled face slid open their door. "Anything off the trolley, dears?" she asked. For Harry, who had never had money of his own, this was a moment of pure bliss. He bought a bit of everything, piling his seat high with wondrous, magical sweets he had only ever dreamed of. There were Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, which Ron warned him could taste like anything from chocolate to Sprouts. There were Drooble's best blowing gum, which filled the compartment with bluebell-colored bubbles that refused to pop for days. And there were pumpkin pasties, warm and savory. But the most fascinating were the chocolate frogs. They weren't just frog-shaped chocolate. They were enchanted to move. And inside each packet was a collectible card of a famous witch or wizard. Harry's first card was Albus Dumbledore, a fact that seemed to disappoint Ron, who had dozens of him already. This small shared experience, the simple joy of buying sweets and comparing cards, cemented their new friendship. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated childhood happiness, a feeling Harry had rarely known. Their comfortable peace was soon interrupted twice more. First, by a round-faced, tearful boy named Neville Longbottom, who had lost his toad, Trevor. They promised to help him look. Shortly after, a girl with bushy brown hair and a rather bossy know-it-all air appeared at their door. Her name was Hermione Granger. She was already in her Hogwarts robes and spoke with an impressive, if slightly overwhelming, confidence. She noticed Harry's broken glasses, and, with a flick of her wand and a perfectly cast oculus reparo, she fixed them. Instantly, she looked down at the pile of sweets and the general state of the boys with a hint of disapproval before continuing on her way, a whirlwind of earnest energy. The final interruption came from a boy with a pale, pointed face and cold, gray eyes, flanked by two thuggish-looking cronies. Draco Malfoy. He introduced himself with an air of immense superiority, and upon recognizing who Harry was, offered him a sneering sort of friendship, advising him to choose the right sort of wizarding friends and insulting Ron's family. Harry, whose loyalty was already firmly with his new, kind-hearted friend, refused Malfoy's offer with a quiet coolness that would define their relationship for the next 7 years. Malfoy, rebuffed and angry, retreated, leaving the compartment once more in a peaceful quiet, the bond between Harry and Ron now even stronger. Asterisk as the afternoon wore on, the landscape outside the train window began to change dramatically. Neat, green fields of the English countryside gave way to rolling hills, and to vast, wild moors covered in a carpet of purple heather. The mountains grew taller, their peaks shrouded in mist, and the sky seemed to get bigger and wider. Sun began to set, painting the clouds in fiery shades of orange and pink. The Hogwarts Express steamed northwards, its scarlet form a single lumi, bright speck of life in the immense, beautiful wilderness of the Scottish Highlands. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels, the gentle rocking of the carriage, and the darkening landscape created a hypnotic, sleepy atmosphere. An announcement echoed through the train. They would be arriving at Hogsmeade Station in 5 minutes. A flurry of activity erupted as students pulled on their robes and gathered their belongings. Harry and Ron did the same, their stomachs a flutter of nerves and excitement. The train finally slowed, and they emerged onto a tiny, dark platform, the air bitingly cold. A great, booming voice cut through the chatter. "Fur's years over here." It was Hagrid, the giant groundskeeper, his immense, shaggy form holding a swinging lantern high in the air. Asterisk Hagrid led the nervous group of first years down a steep, narrow path. The darkness was so complete that they could barely see, the only light coming from Hagrid's lantern and their own pounding hearts. The path opened up suddenly at the edge of a great black lake, its surface as smooth and dark as polished glass. And on the other side, perched atop a high mountain, its windows twinkling like stars against the night sky, was Hogwarts Castle. It was a breathtaking sight, a fairy tale castle more magical and magnificent than anything Harry had ever imagined. "No more 4 to a boat," Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of small enchanted boats waiting at the water's edge. Harry and Ron shared a boat, the small vessel pulling away from the shore on its own, a lantern at its prow casting a gentle golden glow on the dark water. The entire fleet moved in unison, gliding silently across the vast, still lake. There was no sound but the gentle lapping of water against the boats. Everyone was silent, their faces turned up towards the castle, which grew larger and more impressive with every passing moment. They passed through a curtain of ivy that hid a wide opening in the cliff face and arrived in a hidden underground harbor, finally at the foot of the castle itself. The journey was over. They had arrived. They were home. Asterisk. And so the great castle appeared, a promise of a new home. The journey, you see, is always more than just the distance traveled. It is the beginning of every great story, the moment when strangers become friends, and the quiet, rhythmic clatter of the wheels carries us away from the world we knew, towards the one we were always meant to find. The magic began not in the castle, but on that scarlet engine, in a small compartment filled with enchanted sweets and the first sparks of a legendary friendship. Rest now, your own journey is just beginning. Until our next story, my friend.